Good morning. Welcome to Silver Creek, those that are here and those online. Beautiful music. Let's stand. Let's open in prayer and then we'll remain standing, and we have a couple songs to sing. Our dear Father, we thank you so much that we can be in your house this day. We just ask you right now to be in our presence, be in our midst, and just bless this service, Lord, in a mighty way. Just guide and direct. These things we pray. Amen. We're marching to Zion. Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. We're marching, joining in the sweet accord. Us around the throne, down around the throne. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. But those refuse to sing and never knew our God, but children of the heavenly King, but children of the heavenly King, speak their joys abroad, may speak their joys abroad. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. The hill of Zion yields 1,000 sacred sweet. Before we reach the heavenly field, before we reach the heavenly field.
Today's reading comes from Luke chapter 10. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. And he said to them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest. Go your way. Behold, I am sending you out as lambs to the midst of wolves. Carry no money bag, no knapsack, no sandals, and greet no one on the road. Whatever house you enter, first say, 'Peace be to this house.' And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him. If not, it will return to you. And remain in the same house, eating and drinking what they provide for. The laborer deserves his wages. Do not go from house to house. Whenever you enter a town and they receive you, eat what is set before you. Heal the sick in it, and say to them, 'The kingdom of God has come near to you.' But whenever you enter a town and they do not receive you, go into its streets and say, 'Even the dust of your town that clings to our feet were wiped off against you.' Nevertheless, know this, that the kingdom of God has come near. I tell you, it will be more bearable on that day for Sodom than it was for that town." Now I'm going to skip down to verse 17. 72 returned with joy, saying, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And he said to them, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." In that same hour he rejoiced in the Holy Spirit, and he said, "I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding, and revealed them to the little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by the Father, and no one knows who the Son is except for the Father, or who the Father is except for the Son, and anyone whom the Son chooses to reveal him." Then turning to his disciples, he said privately, "Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you that many prophets and kings desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it." We're familiar with the 12 disciples, right? This is an interesting tale of the other 72 from Luke, right? Maybe not the 12, but 72 others that were sent out and just had as an important part to play in the towns that they went to. And it's a warning and an encouragement for us to say, we're going out into very dangerous, sometimes very dangerous times, very dangerous territories. But we can celebrate in that we are seeing work be done that kings and prophets and wise men would have begged, would have wished to see happen. We're at the forefront of God's work in our communities. And that's something to be very excited about. Dear Jesus, bless this time together. Bless your word, and bless your community, and bless your church. Help us to do what's right, live in your light and your will, and be a light to the communities and to the people that you've called us to reach. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
I'll let you set on this one, and then we've got a chorus. So this one is "All Hail the Power of Jesus' Name."
So on the next slide, you'll see a picture of part of my clan. The oldest one in the middle is named Tristan. And there was one day where we were trying to get him ready for bath, and he's a hyperactive child. He has probably got his hyperactivity from his poor dad. And we were telling him to come over. It was bath time. And I told him, Tristan, come hither. And he looked at me, weird. And then his sisters were getting ready, like they're supposed to. And I said, Tristan, come hither. And he came over and he hit his sister. And I said, Tristan, why did you hit her? And he said, you said, come here. And I said, buddy, when have I ever said that before? What made you think that that was going to be a good idea right there? And he said, well, you told me to do it, so I did it. And I'm like, I commended him for, listening to me, or he thought was listening to me. But we had to talk about, if it doesn't really make sense, it might not be what I'm saying to you. Right? And so there's a difference between our simplified understanding of do what dad says and a more rational understanding of I don't think that's what dad actually meant. And in the same way, when we think about simplified understandings, it's easy to say yes or no. But when we try to get into the more detailed contextual understanding, maybe dad didn't actually say hit her. Maybe he said something else that I just wasn't quite understanding. So the next slide, that's what we're really talking about today, is how do we understand what's right and what's good from a biblical understanding. But how do we apply that in context? And that's where it gets difficult. And we've talked about that a little bit before. We talked about that a little bit with Jonah. But we're really going to explore what does it mean in a situation to do what's right. So this is I won't go into the next slide here. I won't go into great detail, but this is basically how I separate it for my students. Is from left to right, we get from the most simplified to the most contextual. The most simplified is a model, right? How do we think about a context? The middle is kind of the blueprint, which is this is how it's supposed to work. And then the last one is the build out with how it actually works, right? And the difference there is kind of like when you get that IKEA shelf and you look at the blueprint and it says there's supposed to be 7 screws. And you look in your kit and you're like, there's only 6 screws. Right? And so this is how it's supposed to work, but it's not there. Right? And so that's where duct tape and ingenuity comes in. But that's the difference between how things are supposed to work and how we actually get it to work. Just this morning, the youngest baby there, Connor J, that you saw earlier, he has an affinity for everything. He's kind of a little baby kleptomaniac. And he misplaced my keys. So I was dramatically and frantically looking for my car keys. I eventually had to steal my wife's. But we still don't know where my keys are. And so my blueprint for this morning was get my keys, start my car, come here. And that obviously was not how it worked. My blueprint this morning was frantically destroy my house, leave it a mess, come here much later than I wanted to. But that's okay, because we made it. But there's a difference between how we expect things to work and how they actually work out, especially with kids, but I mean in life in general. So on the next slide, I just want to read this for you here. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. So just like my story about my son, right? If you think you hear me say hit your sister, think about that for a second. And think, do you think I would tell you to hit your sister? Because there are many things that seem right at first, or seem from plausible sources at first, that may not be all that correct. And you've heard me say this before. If you ever want unsolicited advice, have kids or start something, and you'll get all the unsolicited advice you could handle. So, we were talking about, I had this little setup for 4 different gathers, but 2 things happened. One, I didn't make the connection that next Sunday is Palm Sunday, and so we're going to do something a little bit not this on Palm Sunday, probably more about Palm Sunday. And as I looked at judge and grow, judge being how do we discern, not how do we cast judgment, right? How do we discern whether something's good or bad? And when I looked at grow, it kind of intermingled there. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to touch on both of those. And I made up a new word for it on the next slide, discern, right? So we went from 4 to 3. In case anybody was following along and you're like, yes, 4. I'm looking forward to all 4. Sorry, just 3. All right, so what we're going to be doing, and I showed this back in the Jonah days. This is a 3D, D3, or whatever the organization's called, discipleship model. And like all model, there are limitations. Don't leave looking at all the ways this doesn't work for you. It's just a square that helps us understand how to move through discipleship. Because a lot of times, and this is what I work at even at the Finley level with the CGGC, is that we use discipleship, but we can't really define it. We like the idea of it, but we don't know what it means. And so all we're going to do is we're going to look at it through these 4 stages. And you don't have to read all those little fine print. All you have to know is that there's 4, right? And we'll go through all 4. And we're going to look at all 4 through the context of 4 discourses. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jesus' 5 discourses in Matthew. The last one is about Revelation and the end times, so we're not going to touch on that one. But the first 4 here are Jesus' 4 discourses. And they should sound familiar, right? The Sermon on the Mount. There's a lot of his teachings and parables. The Little Commission, right? Before the Great Commission, he has a Little Commission where he sends out his disciples to get ready. And we kind of read into that from Luke 10. Kingdom of Heaven, which is all the mustard seed. This is what the kingdom of heaven is like, getting his disciples and his people ready for that kingdom. And then the discourse of the church, which is basically preparing them for, hey, I'm leaving soon, so you might want to get your act together. So we're going to walk through those, through our 4 layers of discipleship. So on the next slide, lesson 1, which comes from the first discourse, Matthew 5 through 7, is I do, you watch. And this is, again, I'm reminded of my children. When you tell most children, right, to clean up something, without telling them how to clean up something, how does it usually end up? Not clean, right? Because they don't even know what cleaning means. I remember when we first started giving our kids chores, one of their chores was to dust. And so they would get the little rag and they would just walk by, do the little like tap on it and be like, yeah, okay, it's dusted. And we'd go over and all you have to do is do the 1 finger swipe. And like, no, that is not dusted. And so they have to see that get done first before they even know what that means to dust. And it's true for most things and most people, right? I do stuff with analytics, right, in my professorship job. And I could say to you, run a logistical regression. And most of you would look at me like that and be like, I don't know what that means. And so it would not be very beneficial for me to tell you to do something if you don't know how to do that thing. And so the first thing that Jesus walked through for us is, I'll do this, I'll teach it. You just kind of watch. So on the next slide, we see this in Matthew 5. He starts off, now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. Yeah, for they had to be taught before they got sent out, right? They had to know what they were doing before they went out and tried to do it. And so the modeling here is kind of the modeling stage of that little diagram table I showed you. Jesus was modeling what the Christian life looked like. It was a presentation of godly ideals and teachings to the people that were willing to listen. And on the next slide is all of the points, all of the lessons that come out of those chapters, 5 through 7. And you might see some very familiar lessons in there, the Beatitudes, the eye for an eye, the Lord's Prayer, judging others, true and false prophets, the wise and foolish builder, right? Sand versus rock. Remember that? There's a song about it. You might remember that. And each of those could have their own, right? They could have their own book, their own sermon. So we're not going to go into the details there. But the point of these chapters is Jesus takes his disciples and he says, this is how you should think about living the Christian life. This is how you pray. This is how you attitude. This is how you should think about murder. This is how you should think about revenge. This is how you should think about love. And he's preparing them to do it later. Right now, they're in teaching mode. I do, you watch. And so if you're not to this step yet, then this step is pretty easy comparatively. Because all you have to do is follow. Jesus said this is how to do it. You just got to do it. Or try. Start moving in that direction. And from Mark chapter 1, I'm going to read that for you here. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. At this first stage of discipleship, all you got to do is follow. Follow and watch. I do, you watch. Lesson 2. This is where we get to Matthew chapter 10. This is the mini commission, the small commission. And at this point, it's I do, but you help. You gotta start getting into the action now. And this is from Matthew chapter 10, verse 1. Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. So up to this point, they were just kind of following him, hanging out, getting some good stories, getting some good lessons, I imagine if they had pen and paper during the Sermon on the Mount, they'd be like, well, that's a good one. I'm going to steal that one. Oh, the sand and rock. Oh, good one, Jesus. I'm going to steal that one too. Right. So they're learning. They're learning how to talk. They're learning how to teach. They're learning how to do this Christian walk. But at this stage, he's like, all right, now you have some authority. I'm going to prepare you to go and do this too. And so this part is kind of the blueprint stage of the Christian walk, which is to call and to go and share the teachings of God. I showed you how to do it. I showed you for 3 chapters how to do it. Your turn now. I'm giving that authority to you. And this is kind of a reverse of what we saw in chapter 10 of Luke, because Luke and Matthew are, the synonymous gospels. Are you familiar with that? So Mark is kind of this base that Matthew and Luke are based off of. John is its own. He has his own thing. But the other 3 are kind of similar. There's a lot of overlap there. So this is one of those overlap in Matthew chapter 10. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. I'm guessing a lot of people are not so excited anymore. Because it's one thing to listen to good ideas, right? Thanks, that was a great Sermon on the Mount. I'm going to go home now. He's like, nay, it's your turn. And what we see here is this is the hard part. Phase 1, I do, you watch. Easy. That's like old school TV, right? The NCAA tournament's going on right now, right? And it's much easier to watch those games than to play those games. Right? I'm guessing. I know I couldn't do it. But to do it, all right, so you watch me play this tournament, your turn now, right? What if that would be very exciting. If you went to these games and then about halfway through at halftime, they're like, all right, you watch this the first half, your turn. Time to switch. Probably not going to go out very well for most people. When they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time, you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of the Father speaking through you. So it's still not all on them. They just got to help out, right? They got to go there. They got to be present. I do, but you help. I'll take care of this. So if you're at this phase, if you got the teaching part, if you're in that following stage, then the next stage, the next point is just do it. He gives you opportunities to help. He's given you the foundation to learn. Next step is to take that, to help out, whoever you're called to help. And this next verse in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus says, "A student is not above the teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is not enough for students to be like their teachers and servants like their masters." So this is important too. We don't want to skip this part of helping out first. There's that old saying that says, to be a good leader, you need to first be a good follower, right? So if we jump from, I learned some Bible stories, so now I'm going to take over from here. Don't worry, Jesus, I got this. Like Evel Knievel can't make that leap, right? And so at this stage, Jesus is really saying, you're not above the master. I kind of know what's going on here, and I'm giving you some opportunities to help to make sure you're primed for this. And every single disciple said, yes, we're behind you 100%. Right? No, they didn't. In John 6:66, they said, after this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. Because this is the hard part. Phase 1 was pretty easy. This is what you got to do. Cool, I can listen to that. Phase 2 is, now go do it. Do you remember Jonah? Right? His entire story was not doing that. Most of the Bible is actually stories of people not doing that, which is why it's a really good lesson for us. We have plenty of opportunities to see people that do that. But this is the hard stage. Helping and following in line with how God has set it up, our mission and our calling. So if you get to that one, you get to stage 3. Lesson 3, which is I help, you do. All right, you've shown that you can do this. You've shown that you can walk in the ways that I've taught you. So it's yours now. This is your mission field. And this is from Matthew chapter 13. If you remember, this is the third discourse, the Kingdom of Heaven chapter. And at one point he says this, the disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? So they're past the just sitting down and learning part, and they're saying, okay, I get, we've seen this a couple times. Why do you keep talking in these stories? And he replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. So at this stage, the disciples are starting to get in to the kingdom of heaven. They're starting to get some of the responsibility to share these stories, share these insights, be the teachers. Up until this point, they were being taught just like everybody else. And now they are becoming the teachers, becoming the co-heirs with Christ. And in the next part it says, but blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. So the responsibility for the disciples is getting much greater at this point. But so is their reward. Because many people wanted to see this, wanted to be a part of what had been prophesied for so long in the Old Testament. And these people get to do it. So this is very exciting, but it's also very responsibility driven. So there's one of the things that I work on with different leaders with the CGGC is this idea that if it's hard and it's difficult and it's confusing, then that's your job to dive into it so that it becomes less confusing for the people that you lead. Because it's just as confusing for everybody, but it's your job to make it less confusing for them. You have to be that trailblazer that goes through the woods first to say, okay, this is the path through, so that people can follow. And what we see here is the build out from that little 3-part table I showed you before. At this point, it is the growth of your calling and the claim of your priesthood. And one thing that the CGGC really tries to emphasize is this priesthood of all believers. That all of us are called into our own mission field, our own calling, our own community, our own gathering. And so this stage is when it becomes yours. Jesus kind of helped you through that point, and now you get sent out to your mission field. Whatever that community, whatever that gathering, whatever that person or people are. So the verse in chapter 8 of Romans, it says, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. So we go from the stage where we sit down and we listen, we learn, and now in stage 3, in this third phase, we're becoming co-heirs. That's a little bit different, right, than where we were before. And so the next step, if you've been through step 3 or 2, and you're into step 3 now, is just to assert. You are a co-heir. And that comes with responsibility, but that also comes with immense relational and eternal benefits. And the next part is again, an emphasis of this change in relationship. It comes from John 15. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. You've heard that part probably, right? That's pretty famous verse there. The next verse that comes after that, no longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. So this is the exciting part to me, right? 3 chapters ago, Jesus was all like, you're servants. You don't get to be the master. And now, 3 chapters later, he says, no, you're no longer servants. We're friends. We've moved from servants to co-heirs. That is a huge step, but an important step. And the last lesson from Matthew 18, which is preparing the church for after when he leaves, is I celebrate, you do. At this phase, it's that you got this phase. It's that phase where you're helping someone learn to ride a bike without training wheels, and you let go, right? You got this. I'm just here to celebrate because you're all over that. And from Matthew chapter 18, we see this verse. Again, truly I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything, then ask for it. It will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I will be with them. That's a pretty famous verse too, right? But the beauty of this is we started off from, hey, you just sit there, listen to me. Because you don't know what you're doing, right? That's okay. We're here to teach you. But you don't know what you're doing. Just sit there. I got this. You watch. 2, when you 3 are gathered, I'm there. Because you're so in line with what I've taught you. I'm so in line with your mission and your vision because we've been through this discipleship journey together. You're no longer servants. I don't no longer just give you a list of stuff to do. We are co-heirs. We're friends. And as friends, we have the same mission. And so at this stage, what we're really looking at is the fulfillment of your creation, the fulfillment of your mission, your journey, your relationship with God. And you're living fully in relationship with God and his church. Does everyone remember the 2 commandments that Jesus says are most important? Most important. Love your neighbor, love God. And if you're doing that, and you're in his will, then you are living that fulfillment. You're doing what you were taught to do. And Jesus and heaven celebrate that. Before that other verse, Matthew 18, it says, truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So at this point, we've been taught, we've been developed, we've been set loose, and now we're building eternity. One of my favorite points that my old pastor used to make is that eternal life doesn't start when we die on earth. Eternal life starts now. Because what you're doing now affects that eternity. You are building your reward in heaven, or your lack thereof. Whatever you've bound here on earth, or loosed here on earth, will be reflected. Right? Because we already found out in phase 3 that we're co-heirs with Christ. We're part of that kingdom now. So the next step, again, relatively easy, is just go. Go and do what you've been called to do. Whatever that mission field is, whatever that community is, whatever that good deed is, go and do it. Because you've been equipped, you've been loved, you've been developed, and now you're a friend. Matthew, the book, ends on chapter 28. We had the mini commission, right? And that was the second little talk there that Jesus gave. And at the end of chapter 28, we see what is the Great Commission, very famous verse. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." And that's how Matthew ends. Starting with gathering people who are willing to learn, who are willing to grow, who are willing to take ownership and assert their royal authority and to build the kingdom of heaven. And then he ends the chapter with, all right, go and do it. So why do we gather? We gather to go. We're gathered to equip. We're gathered to discern. We're gathered to think well and do well in line with God's draw for our life. So I only have one challenge question for you today, which is how are we helping our gatherings, whatever they are, whether they be our families or our communities or our works or our churches, to discern their heavenly mission? How do we help people realize what God's calling them to do in their life, to equip them to do it, to walk beside them and eventually send them off and celebrate the good work that they're doing? And we can see that transpire throughout all Matthew. So God has given us the master teacher, right? When we look at the master teacher and look what he did in discipleship, it was not all at once, right? That was 3 years of work combined down into those chapters. But that was 3 years of gathering the right people, equipping them, loving them, giving them authority, and then sending them off. So I go back to my poor son who was hitting his sister. And that could have easily been a scolding moment, right? You don't hit your sister. But what we did is we stepped back and we said, when do you think that Dad would say, hit your sister? Oh, probably never. Ah, good. Dad's probably, unless you both get into boxing for some reason, I'm probably never going to say hit your sister. And so that was at the teaching stage, right? He was learning the rules. He was learning how we operate. He was learning this is this. What about this? What about this? What about this? And kids are really good about that, right? They're really good at saying, hey, don't ride a vehicle. This is a vehicle-free park. Well, what about a bike? Okay. Well, an electrical vehicle-free park. What about a mechanized wheelchair? Okay. Hey, so you can see that they are really good at saying, well, this is the rule, but what about this? What about that? What about this? And so that is a learning stage. And if you have anyone in that learning stage, I would just encourage you to take that opportunity to refine the way that they understand. Because that's not a bad thing, even though it is frustrating at times. It's them trying to figure out, how do I make this thing called life work? And that is the foundation that we use to build up till they are fully discerning and asserting leaders in the church. So I think we have one more song today. But it's a beautiful journey. And I encourage you to take people where they are and encourage them along that discipleship journey so that they one day too can start building their own missional kingdom for here and eternity. Relationships are hard. And the more people you have in a gathering, the harder it gets. When we went from, our joke is that when we went from 4 people in our family, 2 kids, to 3 kids in our family, we went from playing man-to-man to zone. And that's hard. And the more people you're gathering, the more people you're trying to impact, the harder it gets. But take hope and take heart that God will never abandon you in that journey. He will walk with you, and he will guide you. And he will let you know when it's time to transition from I lead, you help, to you do, I help, to eventually you do, and I celebrate. And I pray that all of us can eventually get to the end of this journey and hear celebration. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity to come together, to gather, to learn, to fellowship with one another, and to learn and engage in ways that we can learn and engage. The way that you taught us to, the way that you taught your disciples, and the way that you commanded us to go out and love the world. God, equip us to do good, equip hearts to receive your word, and bless us this week as we go out, live our missional callings, and find ways to build your kingdom here on earth, for now and for all of eternity. Amen. Have a blessed week.